What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, major fight announcement. Light heavyweight is going to have a champion once again at the end of the year. It's either going to be Alex Pereira or Jiří Procházka. Honestly, I'm not prepared to make a prediction on this fight yet. The odds makers have it as a pick'em. The only prediction I will make that I will stand by is that this thing ain't going 25 full minutes.
Yeah.
One of these is going to knock the other one out. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think this is going to be an absolute striker's dream match.
Yeah, I think this is a great matchup. And the 205ers really need this. You know, we had so much stuff take place at 205 over the past few years, right? You know, Jan Blachowicz was the champ, and then he loses his belt, and Glover Teixeira has a great win, and at 43 years old, he's able to steal the belt one last time, and then he goes out there, and then he loses it to Jamal Hill, and then he gives it up, and, you know, there's so much that took place at 205, and it feels like there's nobody that is really at the helm of 205, and this sort of does feel like the right two guys in there to fight for the belt that is vacant and really just needs to be taken home by somebody. And what I really like about it is Alex Pereira was always built for 205. I get that he had business at 185, and kind of the whole reason that he's in the UFC and being talked about as one of the best fighters in the UFC right now is because of his relationship and fight history with Israel Adesanya. So that had to take place before he could fight at his natural weight class, which I believe is 205. I'm just glad that that chapter's behind him because this fresh coat of paint at 205 is so interesting for Alex Pereira. There's some great strikers up there, and there's some great characters up there as well. Everybody seems to forget that Poatan is one of the most entertaining and intriguing characters that the UFC has on their entire roster. Oh, and by the way, he doesn't speak English. You know, whatever he puts on social media is super entertaining. I'm sure what he types out in Portuguese is entertaining, but I don't ever go translate it or try to see what he's saying. I'm just intrigued by what he's posting in the visuals. So I think he matches up well, not only X's and O's wise and in the cage against these big names and these stars and former champions at 205, but I also think there's some cool storylines and promotional aspects to these major fights if he's able to get the title. Now, Jiří Procházka is also the same kind of guy that Alex Pereira is. Jiří is out there in the freezing cold in the snow, like screaming, "I'm ready!" whenever the title shot was ready for him, and he was dealing with that bad shoulder surgery. Jiří Procházka ticks all the same boxes that Pereira does, and I feel like these two guys, for not being Americans and not really being the type of guys that are unconventional martial artists, but very much by the book martial artists, are going to give us a highly entertaining fight in the octagon and outside on the build-up.
Yeah, I think the build-up's going to be fun for this one. I'm really looking forward to the press conference. These are two big, scary guys, and you use the word unconventional. I'll say that, you know, in my opinion, Yuri's a little bit more unconventional with the way he fights
For sure.
than Poatan is. Poatan, you know what you're going to get. Big power punches, walk you down, look you in the face, and put you to sleep. I mean, that's what he's known for. That's what he's done inside the UFC. And by the way, in like less than a dozen fights, if he's able to get his hand raised against Jiří, will have defeated 3 champions, which, I mean, talk about a meteoric rise. I don't know that it gets any more meteoric than that. People are talking about Khamzat's meteoric rise. Well, Poatan's meteoric rise well overshadows Khamzat. He's got Hall of Fame champions on his resume, and he's barely been doing this a couple of years. Now, I understand the kickboxing pedigree and all that comes with it, so I'm not naive to that point, but still the fact remains the same that he's very new to MMA. But then you look at Jiří, he's got a lot of fights. He was over in Asia fighting and rising. He was putting people to sleep long before Alex Pereira was even thinking about coming to MMA. And the thing that I like about Jiří is that he just finds a way to win. You know, if you asked 100 people who know martial arts, how is Jiří Procházka, who's not really a grappler, going to defeat Glover Teixeira and take the belt from him? Almost zero of them, I'm going to go ahead and say zero of them would say that he submits Glover Teixeira from sort of a weird bulldog position with a choke. I mean, nobody saw that coming. I certainly didn't.
Yeah.
And that just speaks to the type of fighter that Jiří is. He knows how to get his hand raised. He knows how to get the job done. And he will try. He's a winner at heart. He will win at whatever cost. And so I really can't wait for this fight. I think Jiří, if there is something that I can nitpick and say he needs to watch out for, is the fact that he keeps his hands very low. He does get hit a lot. And you can't get hit a lot when you're fighting Alex Pereira.
Well, you're spot on about that point. And one thing that I'll say about the submission victory for Jiří is there was probably a lot of people in Vegas that like bet that crazy money line that he would win by submission, and were very pleasantly surprised when they found out just with moments left in the fight that he did get the submission victory, and then they got a big payday from the casinos. But I really do like that Jiří Procházka is back in the mix, because he, to me, is one of the most skilled 205ers that we may have ever seen compete in the UFC. I think his striking is very unconventional, but very difficult to deal with. And most of the time, the people that give you the biggest fits in striking are the people that don't do the normal things that strikers do. You know, everybody knows that if you throw the 1 and 2, watch out for that hook because the 3's coming right after it. It's just like ingrained in all fighters. But Jiří Procházka is the kind of guy that throws a 1-2 and then he'll throw a switch kick up at you, and then he'll follow it up with like a jumping knee or something. So you really don't know what you're going to get out of Procházka, and that's why he's such an exciting fighter with so many exciting finishes on his record. And there actually is a lot of synergy when you look at these two guys' careers before the UFC. Now, you said Pereira didn't have many fights in the UFC, and he's already got a couple of world champions and former champions on his resume. If he beats Jiří, that'll be his third. And that's less than a dozen fights, not UFC fights, but less than a dozen MMA fights. That's just unheard of. If he wins against Jiří, he could retire and would likely find himself in the UFC Hall of Fame, which is just amazing. I love that the UFC has sort of changed directions from being, you know, you got to fight 30, 40, 50 times before you can get your, you know, your due in the UFC. And I love that Jiří Procházka was offered a UFC career like 5 or 6 years before he actually came in, and was like, no, I'm going to stay in this division I'm in right now, work on my skills, continue to build my resume, and then I'll come over. And then he was fast-tracked up to the top of the UFC ranks, proved that he was as good as he thought he was, and now we've got, you know, some legitimate stars on our hands. I think that these guys have done a lot of things similar in their careers, and the fact that their rise to the top of the UFC was unconventional, the fact that their striking is unconventional, and the fact that both of them are polarizing figures both inside and outside the cage, and they do things that most people don't do when they're actually fighting and throwing their strikes in the cage, makes this a very intriguing matchup. Now, I know they're both, you know, consummate martial artists. They're not going to, you know, throw dollies through windows, and they're not going to throw Monster Energy cans at each other, but they are going to entertain us leading up to this. And I don't really know what direction they're going to go with it, but I have a feeling it's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, and this may be a little bit of a weird take, but I don't think there's a title fight that I'm more excited about between now and the end of the year than this one. Oof. And the reason I say that such, you know, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, is because we have Makhachev fighting Oliveira again. Mm-hmm. You have John Jones against Stipe Miocic. You have Leon versus Colby. Mm-hmm. And all of those fights, I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm dying to see each and every one of those fights and how they play out.
Well, we know how 2 out of 3 of those are going to end.
Pretty much. Yeah. I won't tell you which 2 out of 3 I know the outcome to, but I think I know the outcome to at least 66% of them. But this fight between Jiří and Alex, I have no idea who's going to win. And when I say the fight, okay, Makhachev Oliveira, Jones Miocic, Leon Colby, it doesn't give me that same feeling like Jiří Procházka, Alex Pereira. There's something about that fight that is undeniable. I cannot wait to see it. And it is, in fact, the fight I'm looking most forward to between now and 2024.
Yeah, well, that's a great call. And I think that there's some great title fights on the horizon. Obviously, Abu Dhabi is going to be a lot of fun, but we did just see how that story ends. And the other 2 versions, the other 2 books, I should say, feel like we've read them before too. Like Stipe Miocic hasn't really fought at all lately, and everybody's kind of just waiting for him to get knocked off by John Jones so we can move on and John Jones can claim that heavyweight GOAT status that he wants. And then you have to look at Leon and Colby, and then unfortunately, Colby and Kamaru Usman are so similar in so many ways that we almost know how that fight's going to look as well. Now, Colby Covington can certainly shock the world, and I think his mental warfare will play a role into this. He'll do things to Leon Edwards that Kamaru Usman never even dreamed of doing, and I think that could actually change the fight a bit. But I'm excited for all 3 of those fights, and don't get me wrong, they're all very exciting. But I'm sitting here, same with you. I don't know how this one's going to go. Jiří could win this fight. Alex could win this fight. I'm really glad we don't have to do a predictions right now because I'm going to do a deeper dive into both of these guys before I make my actual prediction. But I am really excited for this one. I do think that whoever wins this fight is going to win in knockout fashion, and it's going to really rise them up to the top of the UFC star list.
Well said.